They said it was the end of the line, but what happened next would not only shock the town, it would bring the community together like never before. She pushed her paralyzed father in a wheelchair to school every single day, rain or shine, while he carried her books in his lap and waited outside every class. Years later, she became valedictorian, but when it was time to walk the stage, she limped from exhaustion until her father rose from the crowd, lifted her bag, and helped her up the final steps. Then she handed him her diploma and said, "He carried my future, so today I want him to have this." Welcome to Chill with Joe. Today's shout out goes to Melissa watching from Liverpool, England. Thank you for being part of this amazing community. To get a shout out from us, kindly give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and tell us where you're watching from in the comment section. The sun hadn't fully risen when Mira stepped out of the house, the hem of her school uniform brushing against her ankles, already stained with dust. The air was cool, quiet. She tied her shoes tight, wrapped her textbooks in a plastic sheet, and walked into the next room. Her father, Ravi, sat waiting in his wheelchair, a handmade contraption of bent steel bicycle tires and worn-out cushions. One of the wheels leaned slightly inward. It squeaked when she touched it. But Ravi smiled like it was brand new. "Ready?" she asked softly. He nodded. She kissed his forehead, then slung her backpack over the handles of the wheelchair. She always did that. Let him carry the weight, not because she couldn't, but because he wanted to. Ravi had been paralyzed since he was a boy. But since Mira's mother passed, he had been everything. Mother, father, tutor, cheerleader, and now, wheelchair-bound or not, he was her daily companion to school. Mira began to push. The road stretched ahead, almost 4 miles of gravel, potholes and heat. The chair jerked with every stone. Still, she kept going. Her palms developed calluses, but she never once slowed down. People stared. Some whispered, "Why bring him every day?" Others said it's a distraction. But Mira didn't stop. When they passed the bakery, the owner offered water. When they reached the junction, 2 boys laughed, but she didn't look back. Ravi, with a towel around his neck and her books balanced neatly in his lap, simply waved at them. They reached the school gate just before the bell. Mira parked him under a mango tree beside the fence. She pulled out a folded umbrella and opened it above him. "I'll be here," he said. "I'll be right back with an A," she replied. She ran toward the building as the school bell rang. The next morning, Mira stood staring at the broken wheel in silence. Ravi tried to act like nothing had happened, tying an old cloth around the axle to keep it upright. But the chair tilted, jerking with every small move. The wheel was done, and they both knew it. "Maybe we just take a break," Ravi offered gently, but Mira shook her head. "Breaks don't pass exams." So, they tried anyway. She pushed slowly, carefully, dragging the ruined wheel across the uneven road. Every few feet, they had to stop. Ravi leaned to one side, gripping the edge of the seat for balance. Sweat mixed with dried mud on Mira's neck. They hadn't made it halfway when a voice called out behind them. "Wait!" A man jogged over, tall, middle-aged, with hands that looked permanently stained by wood varnish. He wore no shoes, only dust-covered slippers. "I've been watching you, too," he said, breathing hard. "Every day, rain or shine." Mira blinked. Robbie said nothing. "I'm a carpenter," the man went on. "Not rich, not smart like you, but I can fix things. Chairs mostly." He paused, then added, "I'd like to build you a new one." Mira's lips parted, surprised. "You don't have to. I want to," he said firmly. "You're pushing a man like he's carrying gold. That kind of love, it deserves wheels that don't fight you back." That evening, they followed him to a small workshop near the edge of town. Sawdust floated in the warm air. A man measured Ravi's arms, tested the height of Mira's hands on the grips, asked about pocket sizes and seat comfort like he was crafting a throne. 3 days later, it was ready. The new chair gleamed in the morning sun. Built from polished wood and salvaged bicycle parts, it rolled smoothly, silently. It had padded armrests, a weatherproof canopy, and deep side pockets, perfect for holding Mira's books. When Ravi sat in it for the first time, his posture straightened. Mira pushed it a few feet and gasped. It moved with barely a touch. "I don't feel like I'm dragging you anymore," she whispered. Ravi chuckled. "That's because now you're flying." Word spread fast. Shopkeepers watched them pass and nodded in quiet respect. Someone donated a rain poncho. A fruit vendor slipped an apple into Mira's hand every Friday. For the first time, the town didn't just see them, they noticed them. One afternoon, as they reached the school gate, a stranger with a large camera stood across the street. He raised the lens without speaking. The shutter clicked 3 times. Then he disappeared into the crowd. Mira turned confused. Ravi frowned slightly. "Probably just a tourist," he said, but deep in her gut, Mira felt something shift, a gaze that lingered, a moment that had been captured without their permission. She looked down at her father's hands resting gently on her books, and suddenly she had a feeling the world was about to look closer. It began quietly, just a photo shared on a local blog. A grainy snapshot of a barefoot girl pushing her paralyzed father in a handcrafted wheelchair. Books tucked in his lap, rain clouds behind them, sunlight ahead. The caption read, "She doesn't carry her past, she pushes it into the future." Within hours it spread like wildfire. By morning, the image was everywhere. Instagram reels, Facebook pages, WhatsApp groups, people added music quotes, hashtags. She pushes dreams of father and daughter goals grilled education. By the end of the week, Mira and Ravi were front page news. Photographers camped outside the school gates. Reporters chased them after class. Strangers offered rides, interviews, sponsorships. One anchor tried to force a microphone in front of Ravi. Mira, she shouted, flashing her badge. How long have you been pushing your father to school? Did you do it to get noticed? Mira stood frozen, clutching her books tightly. Ravi stepped between them, calm but firm. She did it because she loves me. That's all. They tried to return to normal, but nothing felt the same. Teachers stared. Students whispered. Mira stopped eating lunch outside. She rushed to class and rushed home, dodging eyes wherever she could. One afternoon, a cameraman leaned out of a van and called to her. Smile, dream girl. Mira didn't smile. Later that night, curled up on their shared cot, she whispered, Papa, I didn't do this for likes. I just wanted to pass my exam. Ravi gently tucked her books away and placed a hand on her head. And you will, he said. Fame fades, knowledge stays. The next morning, a letter arrived sealed in gold. It wasn't from the school. It wasn't from the government. It was from a university, not just any university, one of the biggest in the country, a full scholarship, a dorm room, a stipend, transportation for her and her father. Handwritten at the bottom were 5 words. We see what she carries. Mira read it twice, then looked up at her father. But before she could speak, her hands began to tremble because beneath that envelope were 5 more from universities all over the world. The letter sat on the table for 3 days. Mira didn't touch it. She didn't frame it, didn't show it off like the neighbors expected. The gold seal remained unbroken, but every night after her father slept, she stared at it with wide, silent eyes. The offer was life-changing. A full scholarship to Crestview University, top-ranked, sprawling campus, state-of-the-art labs. Everything she had dreamed of, everything she had studied for, everything she had earned. But it was 8 hours away, and it didn't come with space for a wheelchair. Her principal called it a miracle. Her teachers cried, but Mira stayed quiet. One evening, Ravi wheeled into the kitchen to find her sitting in the dark, the letter clutched in her hand. You should go, he said gently. She shook her head without looking up. It's your dream. No, she whispered. We dreamed this together. I won't go anywhere. You can't come with me. Ravi opened his mouth but stopped. He saw the tears forming in her eyes, the way she kept blinking them back. Her shoulders hunched like the weight of success was heavier than the weight of sacrifice. Everyone says it's a blessing, she murmured. Then why does it feel like a punishment? He didn't answer. He just reached across the table and took her hand, squeezing it. At night, long after she'd fallen asleep, Ravi sat by the window in silence. He stared at the stars, a map open on his lap. Bus routes, lodging near campus, accessibility centers. He turned each page with trembling fingers, circling numbers, underlining phrases. He had once told Mira he couldn't carry her forever, but maybe he could carry her just a little further. In the stillness of that room, as the world outside slept, Ravi began to make a quiet plan, one she didn't need to know about yet. Because sometimes love meant pushing quietly from behind, even when you weren't the one being seen. Crestview was nothing like home. The buildings towered like giants. Glass walls shimmered with reflections of neon. The streets buzzed with voices, footsteps, car horns, and the kind of energy that made you forget to breathe. Mira stood in the middle of it all, shoulders squared, backpack heavy. Her father just behind her in his handmade chair, the same one with book pockets and worn rubber wheels. Robbie's eyes darted between street signs and crowds, scanning for anything familiar. There was none, but they had made it barely. They rendered a tiny room above a laundromat just 3 blocks from campus. No elevator, just a narrow, groaning staircase that Ravi tackled backward, Mira holding the chair steady every single time. The room had 1 mattress, 1 desk, and a rusted fan that clicked when it turned. There were no welcome banners, no teary goodbyes, just a girl and her father, beginning again each morning. Before the sun climbed over the skyline, Mira rolled Ravi down the cracked sidewalk toward campus. The roads were smoother than the ones back home, but the stairs were sharper. Students walked in pairs or groups, sipping coffee, wearing earbuds, barely glancing. Ravi waited outside every lecture hall, always in the same spot under the tree near the engineering building. He carried her books, tucked her lunch, sometimes read aloud from her notes when she forgot something. But college students weren't like school children. They stared longer, some pointed, some took pictures, others whispered, "Who's the old guy outside programming class? Is that her dad or some campus charity project? She's smart. Why drag him around like that?" Mira heard it all, but she said nothing. She went to class, took notes, aced her quizzes. Then she came out, smiled at Ravi, and handed him her paper. He always clapped softly, pride lighting up his tired face. They ate lunch together on the cement ledge near the fountain, shared stories, reviewed formulas, watched as the world moved too fast around them. Still, the days grew harder. Mira's classes stretched longer. Projects stacked up. Assignments turned into all-nighters. On weekends, she cleaned houses nearby just to afford the room. Ravi offered to help, but she refused. "You already carried me here," she'd say. Some nights he found her asleep at the desk, face pressed into a book, fingers still curled around a pen. One evening during finals week, the routine pushed too far. It had been a brutal day. Free exams, no lunch, no break. She hadn't eaten since morning. She'd been tutoring a freshman for extra cash and skipped dinner without even realizing. They had just gotten home. Ravi went to fill their water bottle. When he turned back, Mira was standing near the bed, her hand pressed against the wall. Then her knees buckled. She collapsed before she could even call his name. The bottle dropped from Ravi's hand. He wheeled forward in panic, lifting her head from the cold floor. "Mirror, mirror," she didn't answer. Her breathing was shallow, her face pale, her hands ice cold. In that moment, Ravi felt the full weight of their journey. Not on the road, but in her body, the toll she never admitted, the exhaustion she never spoke of, the sacrifice she hid behind every A. He held her close, whispering her name again, and in his silence, a decision began to take shape, because dreams meant nothing if they cost her health. If they cost her. The auditorium pulsed with energy. Balloons floated high above the crowd. Bright lights swept across rows of proud parents, beaming professors and graduates in navy robes and gold tassels. Mira sat among them, gown pressed, cap steady, hands trembling. For years had passed since that rain-soaked photo changed everything. For years of early mornings and late nights, of balancing textbooks and tray dinners, of walking through whispers and pushing through exhaustion, and always with Ravi waiting just outside. Now it was the end. The university had chosen her. Mira Ravi Singh as valedictorian. Top of her class, highest honors, first from her district. The girl who pushed her father to school every day was now the one being pushed forward by applause. But no one knew what her speech said. Professors asked, friends guessed. Even her roommate tried to sneak a peek. Mira kept it folded in her pocket. Silent, steady, because some things are meant to be heard once. As the chancellor introduced her, the hall fell silent. She rose slowly, walked to the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor. Cameras flashed, phones lifted. Her face appeared on the giant screen behind her. She took a deep breath and smiled. Then she began. "When I was 10, I pushed a wheelchair 4 miles every day so I could go to school. But the truth is I wasn't pushing it. He was carrying me." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I studied at night because he stayed awake to quiz me. I passed tests because he refused to let me give up. I kept going because he never let me feel the weight of sacrifice." She paused, scanning the sea of faces. People called me brave. But bravery looks different when you're not the one in pain. A hush fell deeper. My father never entered a classroom, but every time I walked into one, he was already there outside the window, mouthing definitions, holding my books, waiting in sun and storm. A lump caught in her throat. She reached into her robe and pulled out a small crumpled photo. The one that went viral. She held it up. "I never wanted attention. I only wanted one person to be proud of me, and he was." She looked to the side of the stage where Ravi sat in the shadows dressed in a borrowed suit, his hands gripping the armrests of a new donated wheelchair. "But today isn't about me." She turned back to the microphone, voice clear, eyes shining. "It's about the man who taught me that love doesn't walk beside you. It rolls quietly behind you, making sure you never fall." She took a breath, then said the words no one expected. "I'd like to invite someone on stage." She pointed to the far aisle. "Papa, come take your diploma." Gasps echoed across the room. Ravi froze. For a moment he didn't move. Then slowly, shakily, he wheeled forward. The crowd parted. Thousands stood. Mira stepped down from the podium and ran toward him, kept falling, tears streaming. Together, they climbed the stage, not as a father and daughter, but as two graduates, one with a medal and one with a legacy. The auditorium buzzed with electric joy. Names echoed from the speakers. Cameras flashed. Flowers were flung. Hugs exchanged. One by one, students climbed the stage and received their scrolls, their cheers bouncing off the high walls. But when Mira's name was called, the energy shifted. She rose slowly from her seat, her left ankle stiff, still wrapped from an injury she earned during her final presentation week. She had pushed through the pain, exams, and all, but today, even walking felt like a mountain. Still she kept going. She took a step, then another, until the third step trembled beneath her, and before anyone else could move, a familiar figure emerged from the crowd. Ravi. He didn't wait for permission. He wheeled forward fast, then stood painfully, determinedly, using a single crutch to support himself. It was the first time many had seen him on his feet. The crowd gasped as he limped toward her, reaching gently for her shoulder strap. Without a word, he lifted the bag from her back. Mira froze, then smiled, and together, side by side, they climbed the last few steps. When they reached the center of the stage, she turned to him. He tried to hand the bag back, but she shook her head. Instead, she pulled the diploma from her hand, turned to face the silent, watching crowd, and raised her voice. "This isn't mine alone." Her voice broke, but she held steady. "He carried my books. He carried my future. So today I want him to take this." And with both hands, Mira placed the diploma in her father's arms. The auditorium erupted. People stood, applause thundered, some wept openly, professors wiped their glasses, students clapped harder than they had all day. But behind the curtain, out of view, stood one man who didn't move. He wiped his eyes slowly, a silent tear running down his cheek. Not because of the diploma, but because he recognized Ravi. And 30 years ago, they'd once sat in the same classroom. Only one of them had graduated. Until now, the ceremony was nearly over, but before the closing remarks, the chancellor stepped aside and a tall silver-haired man in a navy suit walked slowly to the podium. His expression was unreadable. His eyes, however, were still damp. The audience hushed. He adjusted the mic and cleared his throat. For those of you who don't know me, he began, I'm Dina Maroshi. I stood on this stage for over 20 years. Watched thousands walk across it. He paused, gaze drifting toward Mira and Ravi, who stood quietly near the edge of the stage. But today, he continued, voice steady, I saw something I never expected, someone I thought I'd lost. He looked at Ravi. Decades ago we shared a classroom. Ravi was brilliant. More brilliant than I ever was. But life took him in a different direction. A silence fell. I became a dean. He became a father. And today I watched that father become what he always was. A teacher, a scholar, a man who never stopped pushing. He reached into his coat pocket and unfolded a sheet of paper. Which is why starting this fall, Crestview University is proud to announce a new annual scholarship in his name. A murmur rippled through the crowd. It will be awarded not to the smartest student, not to the fastest or loudest, but to the one who pushes someone else forward. Applause swelled. Mira covered her mouth. Ravi blinked, speechless. The dean looked at them both and said softly into the microphone, because sometimes the greatest heroes don't wear capes, they sit quietly in wheels. On stage, Mira turned to Ravi. Her face glowed not with pride but with peace. She leaned down, kissed his forehead like she had as a child, and whispered, let's go home, graduate. Then, without fanfare, she stepped behind his chair, placed her hands on the handles, and pushed the wheels rolled gently toward the curtain. The lights faded. The crowd watched in reverent silence as they disappeared. Father and daughter, shoulder to shoulder, legacy to legacy, and as the final image held, Mira pushing her father away from the spotlight, smiling through tears. A voiceover whispered, she carried her father every day to school until the day he carried her to the future. What did you learn from this story? Don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and please subscribe for more amazing stories. See you in our next one.